April 18th, 1944. Ypsilanti, Michigan, 3:47 a.m. The night shift foreman at Willow Run, a man named Jack Thornton, stands at the edge of the main assembly line with a stopwatch in his calloused hand. The factory floor stretches before him like a metallic canyon, over a mile long, a quarter-mile wide, its ceiling lost in the industrial haze of welding sparks and rivet smoke. The sound is constant, overwhelming. The pneumatic thunder of 20,000 rivet guns firing in syncopated rhythm, the screech of aluminum being shaped, the rumble of overhead cranes carrying wing sections the size of houses. Thornton clicks the stopwatch. 63 minutes. Another B-24 Liberator bomber, 4 engines, 110-foot wingspan, 10.50 caliber machine guns, capable of carrying 8,000 pounds of bombs across an ocean, rolls off the line and out into the Michigan darkness. Henry Ford himself had stood on this exact spot 2 years earlier, when the building was still just an architect's fever dream sketched across farmland. "We will build 1 bomber per hour," Ford had declared to a room full of skeptical military officials and engineers who thought the old man had finally lost his mind. The B-24 wasn't a Model T. It wasn't even a truck. It was a flying fortress with 1,550,000 parts, 360,000 rivets, 13,500 bolts. Each aircraft required 450,000 separate manufacturing operations. The existing production methods, skilled craftsmen hand-assembling bombers in small batches, meant America's factories were producing maybe 1 or 2 bombers per day, per facility. Ford said he'd make 1 per hour using assembly line techniques. The Army Air Forces. Brass smiled politely and hoped for maybe 1 per day. By spring of 1944, Thornton and 42,000 other workers at Willow Run are beating Ford's promise. The plant operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The assembly line moves continuously, never stopping, a river of aluminum and steel flowing from raw materials at one end to fully operational warplanes at the other. Every 63 minutes, sometimes faster, another Liberator emerges. Thornton watches this one taxi toward the airfield, its propellers not yet spinning, towed by a truck. Tomorrow, after final checks and a test flight, it will begin the journey to a bomber group in England or Italy or the Pacific. Next week, it will be over Germany, 3,000 miles east, in a bunker beneath Tempelhof Airport in Berlin. Oberst Friedrich Weber of the Luftwaffe Intelligence Service stares at a report that has just crossed his desk. The numbers are typed neatly on captured American documents, verified by agent reports, confirmed by photo reconnaissance. Weber reads them 3 times, then crumples the paper and throws it across the room. "Schwachsinn," he mutters. Nonsense. According to the report, a single American factory, one building in Michigan, is producing more heavy bombers in 1 month than all of Germany's aircraft manufacturers combined. The report claims this facility, something called Willow Run, completed 432 B-24 Liberators in March 1944 alone. Weber does the mathematics in his head. That's 14 bombers per day. More than 1 every 2 hours, around the clock. It's impossible. Weber retrieves the report from the floor, smooths it on his desk, and stamps it with red ink. Allied disinformation, not credible. He files it away and moves to the next intelligence brief. But over the coming months, the reports keep coming. Prisoner interrogations from captured American air crews, all mentioning Willow Run. Reconnaissance photographs showing hundreds of B-24s lined up at the airfield adjacent to the factory. Radio intercepts discussing production schedules. The numbers never change, never vary in a way that would suggest fabrication. Weber continues to mark them as propaganda. The entire German intelligence apparatus continues to mark them as propaganda. It's the only explanation that makes sense, because the alternative is too terrifying to accept. Back in Michigan, Jack Thornton checks his watch. Another hour has passed. He walks along the assembly line, past Station 4 where the wings are being attached, past Station 7 where the cockpit instruments are being installed. Women in coveralls and headscarves, Rosie the Riveters, the propaganda posters call them, work alongside men, their hands moving with practiced precision. A woman named Dorothy Chen, formerly a schoolteacher, drives rivets into a tail section with mechanical efficiency. She's been on shift for 6 hours and will work 4 more. She doesn't know Oberst Weber in Berlin, doesn't believe she exists, doesn't believe this factory exists. She only knows that her hands hurt, that the quota needs to be met, and that every plane she helps build might bring her brother home from the Pacific a little sooner. Thornton hears the familiar sound, the industrial horn signaling another completion. He clicks his stopwatch again. 61 minutes this time. They're getting faster. The concept of Willow Run had begun not in 1940, but in 1940, when the war in Europe was already revealing a terrible arithmetic. Charles Sorensen, Henry Ford's chief engineer and the architect of the moving assembly line, had toured the Consolidated Aircraft plant in San Diego, where B-24s were being built the traditional way. He had watched skilled craftsmen working on individual aircraft, each one a bespoke project taking weeks or months. Sorensen had pulled out a notebook and started sketching. Not an aircraft. A machine to build aircraft. The problem was scale. Consolidated's facility could produce 1 B-24 every day and a half at best. America needed thousands of bombers, and it needed them immediately. President Roosevelt had called for 50,000 military aircraft per year, a number that seemed laughable to everyone except men like Sorensen, who'd spent decades watching impossible production targets become routine. Sorensen flew back to Detroit and walked into Henry Ford's office with drawings of a factory that didn't yet exist, designed to build a product Ford Motor Company had never manufactured, using techniques never applied to something this complex. Ford looked at the plans for 30 seconds and said one word. Build it. March 1942. The ground breaks on what will become the largest room under one roof in the world. The factory rises across 3,500,000 square feet of former farmland. The main building is shaped like an L, the long side running parallel to the new airfield Ford is constructing, the short side perpendicular, creating a continuous flow. Raw aluminum enters at one end. Finished bombers exit at the other. No storage, no stopping, no going backward. Pure flow. The building's design is so unprecedented that when German reconnaissance photographs first capture it from high altitude later that year, Luftwaffe analysts categorize it as an aircraft storage depot. The notion that the entire structure is a single factory seems architecturally impossible. By the summer of 1943, the line is operational but struggling. The first B-24s are emerging, but slowly. One every 4 or 5 hours, not one per hour. The problems are everywhere. Parts don't fit. Tolerances are wrong. Workers trained to build cars in thousandths of an inch are now working with aircraft specifications in 10,000ths. The B-24 is also a moving target. The Army keeps changing the design, adding modifications, new gun positions, updated radio equipment. Every change ripples backward through the entire assembly process. Edsel Ford, Henry's son and the company president, spends sleepless nights wondering if his father's promise was hubris. The breakthrough comes from an unexpected source. A woman named Josephine Goman, a social worker Ford has hired to manage workforce integration, suggests breaking the complex tasks into smaller, more repetitive operations. The same principle Henry Ford used for Model T production, but taken to an extreme. Instead of one worker installing an entire instrument panel, 6 workers each install specific instruments, over and over, hundreds of times per shift. The learning curve compresses. Speed increases. By October 1943, production hits 1 bomber every 90 minutes. By January 1944, it's 75 minutes. By March, 63 minutes. The line never stops moving. Workers step on and off at designated stations, like passengers boarding a slow-moving train. Lieutenant Hans Müller of the Luftwaffe's 2nd Fighter Wing experiences Willow Run's output firsthand on May 12, 1944, though he doesn't know it. His Focke-Wulf 190 is at 22,000 feet over Brunswick, climbing toward a formation of B-24s. The 78th such formation he's intercepted in 3 months. There are always more. Always. He shoots down one, sees it spiral into clouds, trailing fire, and before he can celebrate, his wingman is screaming over the radio because another formation is coming from the south, and another from the west. The sky is full of them. Müller lands at his base with his ammunition expended and his fuel gauge showing empty. In the debriefing room, he reports 15 B-24s destroyed by his squadron. The intelligence officer nods, writes it down, and mentions casually that reconnaissance counted 240 B-24s in today's attacks across their sector alone. Müller does the math. If Germany is shooting down 15 per mission and they're still coming in formations of 240, where are the Americans getting these aircraft? The intelligence officer has no answer. Or rather, he has the answer sitting in reports from Berlin marked not credible. The reports about Willow Run. The reports claiming impossible production numbers. The reports everyone has decided to ignore because accepting them means accepting that Germany has already lost the war, that the industrial disparity is so vast that no amount of tactical brilliance or advanced technology can overcome it. Back at Willow Run, the line continues. Station 14, tail assembly. Station 22, engine installation, all 4 Pratt & Whitney R-1830 radials lowered simultaneously by overhead crane, bolted into place by teams working in synchronized choreography. Station 31, fuel tanks, bomb bay doors, electrical systems. Station 44, gun turrets, nose, tail, ball, dorsal. Each turret pre-assembled in a separate building and installed as a complete unit. Station 58, final inspection, where Army Air Forces officers walk through each aircraft with checklists containing 1,200 items. Station 61, the end of the line, where the completed bomber rolls out into sunlight or darkness or rain, depending on the shift. Jack Thornton watches another one emerge at 11:47 p.m. on June 2nd, 1944. He doesn't know that in 4 days, many of these bombers will support the largest amphibious invasion in human history. He doesn't know that Oberst Weber in Berlin still doesn't believe this factory exists. He only knows that tomorrow's production target is 15 aircraft. He clicks his stopwatch and walks back inside, where the line continues to move, and the sound of 42,000 workers building the impossible never stops. The scale of Willow Run's production becomes impossible to hide by the summer of 1944, yet German intelligence continues to reject it. The problem isn't lack of data, it's that the data describes something outside the framework of German industrial experience. In Stuttgart, the Messerschmitt factories employ 12,000 workers and produce perhaps 90 fighter aircraft per month when operating at peak efficiency. In Regensburg, the Me-262 jet fighter production facility represents the cutting edge of German manufacturing, yet struggles to complete more than a handful of revolutionary jets per week. The notion that Americans have built a single facility with 42,000 workers producing 432 heavy bombers per month, aircraft far more complex than fighters, is beyond German comprehension. It violates everything they understand about manufacturing, labor, and industrial capacity. Major Otto Brenner, assigned to the Reich Air Ministry's Production Planning Office, receives updated intelligence estimates in August 1944. The Americans now have over 6,000 B-24 Liberators in operational service across all theaters. Brenner cross-references this against known American aircraft factories, Consolidated in San Diego and Fort Worth, Douglas in Tulsa, North American in Dallas. Even at optimistic production estimates, these facilities cannot account for the numbers. The math requires Willow Run to be real, to be producing at the reported rates. Brenner writes a memo to his superiors arguing that German intelligence must accept the Willow Run data and adjust strategic planning accordingly. The memo is returned to him 3 days later with a handwritten note from a general. We do not make policy based on enemy propaganda figures. On September 24, 1944, Willow Run produces its 5,000 B-24 Liberator. Henry Ford, now 81 years old and in declining health, attends the ceremony. He doesn't give a speech. He simply watches the aircraft roll off the line, watches the workers, many of them women, many of them black workers who'd migrated from the South for these jobs, cheer and take photographs. Ford had built an empire on the premise that any product could be mass-produced if you broke it down into simple enough steps and optimized the flow. He'd proved it with cars. Now he's proved it with airplanes. He leaves the ceremony after 15 minutes, exhausted, and doesn't return to the factory. The line continues without him. By December 1944, production peaks. Willow Run completes 432 bombers that month, precisely the number Oberst Weber had labelled propaganda 8 months earlier. The facility is now outproducing all of Germany's bomber production combined by a factor of 3. But the strategic situation has already shifted. With air superiority established over Europe and B-24's flying missions almost unopposed, the Army Air Forces begins to reduce orders. They have enough bombers. They need fighters now, need tankers, need transports. Willow Run's production starts to taper. By spring 1945, the facility is completing 8 bombers per day instead of 14. It's still an astonishing rate, but the sense of desperate urgency has faded. The war in Europe is nearly over. April 30th, 1945. A Luftwaffe Hauptmann named Klaus Richter sits in a prisoner of war camp in Mississippi, playing cards with other captured German officers. The war in Europe ends a week later, and the Americans begin a program of industrial education for high-ranking POWs, tours of American factories meant to demonstrate why Germany lost. Richter, who'd flown 187 combat missions before being shot down, is skeptical. He expects propaganda, staged demonstrations, inflated claims. When his group is loaded onto a bus in June 1945 and told they're being taken to Michigan to tour an aircraft factory, Richter assumes he'll see a Potemkin village, a carefully dressed stage, set, designed to impress and intimidate. The bus arrives at Willow Run on June 18, 1945. Production has slowed significantly. The last bomber rolled off the line in May, but the facility is still operational, still overwhelming. The German officers are led through the main building, and Richter stops walking about 200 feet inside. He simply stands there, staring down the length of the assembly line, watching it disappear into haze a mile away. An American captain serving as their guide asks if he's all right. Richter doesn't answer for nearly 30 seconds. Finally, he says in careful English, "We were told this was propaganda. We were told your production figures were impossible. They showed us intelligence reports that said this facility did not exist." The American captain shrugs. "It exists. You're standing in it." The tour continues. The German officers see the sub-assembly buildings where wings and tail sections and gun turrets were manufactured. They see the tool and die shops with precision equipment beyond anything in German factories. They see the overhead conveyor systems, the quality control stations, the final inspection bays. They see the employee parking lots, acres of automobiles belonging to workers, more cars than many German cities had in total. They see the airfield with dozens of B-24s parked in neat rows, even now, months after production ended. They see the administrative offices where production schedules are posted, daily targets, hourly output, efficiency metrics tracked with precision that would make a Prussian quartermaster weep with envy. Klaus Richter tours the facility in silence, his face carefully neutral, his hands clasped behind his back. But inside, something is breaking. He thinks of every mission he flew, every formation of bombers he attacked, every impossible wave of aircraft that kept coming no matter how many the Luftwaffe destroyed. He thinks of the intelligence reports marked "not credible." He thinks of his commanders insisting that American production figures were exaggerated by a factor of 5 or 10. They weren't exaggerated. If anything, they were understated. Germany had been fighting an enemy that could manufacture aircraft faster than Germany could train pilots to fly them. That evening, back at the POW camp, Richter writes in a journal he's been keeping. The entry is brief. "We lost the war before it started. We just didn't know it yet." Willow Run produces its final B-24 Liberator on May 31st, 1945. Total production, 8,685 aircraft in 25 months. At peak efficiency, the facility completed 1 bomber every 63 minutes. The building is repurposed after the war. Kaiser Frazer automobiles, General Motors transmissions, eventually an industrial park. The assembly line is dismantled, sold for scrap. The workers disperse. Back to Detroit, back to the South, back to lives interrupted by war. Dorothy Chen returns to teaching. Jack Thornton takes a job at a Ford engine plant. Josephine Goman writes a book about the social transformation of wartime labor that nobody publishes. By 1950, Willow Run is fading from memory, becoming a footnote in manufacturing history. But in a small apartment in Munich, Klaus Richter keeps a photograph he took during that June 1945 tour. A blurry image of an assembly line stretching into industrial haze. A line that couldn't exist, but did. He keeps it as a reminder. Never underestimate your enemy. Never dismiss intelligence because it describes something you cannot imagine. And never, ever believe that the impossible is impossible just because you lack the vision to see how it might be done. The photograph stays in his desk drawer until his death in 1983. His daughter finds it while sorting his effects, looks at it without recognition, and throws it away. The image shows nothing but a factory floor, after all. Just machinery and empty space where 42,000 workers once built miracles at a rate of 1 every 63 minutes.